Last time Tennessee was a 4 seed was in 2000. They are a 4 seed now, play Louisiana, then potentially Duke in the second round. How did they do back in 2000 when they were a 4 seed? I was there. I remember. And that was quite something. Last time they were a 4 seed, how did Tennessee do?
They were the 4 seed. And by the way, we talked about this yesterday. That team won to share the SEC regular season title. This team didn't come close to that. They somehow both got 4 seeds. You're right. That's respect for Rick Barnes versus no respect for Jerry Green, because there's no reason that Jerry Green team shouldn't have gotten a 3 or a 2 seed in the tournament. But they got a 4 seed. They won their first game against Louisiana Lafayette by 5. And then they vanquished, at the time, the defending national champs, UConn Huskies. And what was...
Yeah, but you had the little fat guard who turned his ankle right before.
Oh.
It was the little fat guard.
I don't even remember.
The pudgy guard. He had the pudgy face. He was supposed to be the next Ray Allen, and he wasn't. Anyway, he turned his ankle, and I watched him in pregame warm-ups. I was like, if I bet, I was going to bet on that game.
So what you're saying is the only Sweet 16 Jerry Green could get that loaded team to was one off an injury?
Pretty much. Pretty much. By the little fat guard.
So they get to the Sweet 16, and what people forget, there was a series of upsets by the time they got to the Sweet 16, because 2 seed Cincinnati had got upset by Tulsa. 3 seed Ohio State had gotten upset by Miami. And 1 seed Stanford had gotten upset by North Carolina. So Tennessee was playing not your father's North Carolina. They were playing a Posteen Smith, not yet Roy Williams, North Carolina program that was an 8 seed. And Tennessee was far and away the highest seed in this bracket. And it looked like their first Final Four was en route. They got a 9-point lead against North Carolina with about, 10 minutes to go in the Sweet 16. And you bring up Julius Peppers coming in. I bring up Jerry Green decides, hey, let's just shoot a bunch of threes with 30 seconds on the shot clock the rest of the way.
If Brendan Hayward doesn't get in foul trouble, they win that game easily, because Julius Peppers came in because Hayward got in foul trouble. And then suddenly it was like everything changed. And I blame Mark Packer of WVLT in Knoxville, because he came up to me and he goes, looks like they got this one, which you never say during a game,
Never.
Especially in the media, because you have a vested interest, because you want to go to the next site and the next site, and you want to cover a Final Four. That was a pretty good run for Dave. That was a Fiesta Bowl, Super Bowl, Women's Final Four, and the series we're talking about against UNC in my first 3 months at the WNOX. So I was off and running and pretty happy about my travel schedule. But that UNC game is one they should have won. By the way, it was Khalid El-Amin that was the fat UConn guard. Do you remember him now?
I do not, actually.
He was a pudgy little guard. He was good. Be sure and click the like button. We appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed at this point, you need to do so. So that was the last time. And I believe they would have beaten Tulsa. They would have played Tulsa. So they had every opportunity to make the Final Four. It was laid out for them, and that just didn't happen. Now, you go back to 1999. Did you mention this one lost to Southwest Missouri State by 30? Do you remember that?
I don't remember it, because at the time I was living in Memphis, and actually I was so young at the time that it was like, while Tennessee football was big in Memphis, the only big thing in Memphis basketball-wise was Memphis basketball.
Well, they played Delaware the game before Southwest Missouri State, and my goodness, I think it was like 46-40 was the final. It set basketball back 15 years. They had to just redo the sport altogether. It was terrible. They were going to bring back Bird and Magic to the NBA. It was the worst game I'd ever seen. And then get beat by Southwest Missouri State by 30. I'll never forget that. And then you go back to the Dale Ellis days as a 4 seed. You did some research, young man.
Yes. So 1981, I believe. Did I get that right? 1981. Yes. So for those who don't understand, the NCAA tournament before 1980 did not do seeding. They just broke teams down by region and where they played. They started the seeding thing to kind of make the brackets and regions a little more competitive, bring a little more competitive balance to it. They started that in 1980. 1981, Tennessee was a 4 seed. At the time, it was only 48 teams in the tournament, so Tennessee got a bye in the first round. And in the second round, they faced VCU. And in overtime, at the buzzer, Dale Ellis hit a game winner to make it 58-56, which sent them to their first Sweet 16 in school history. They lost, I think, to Virginia in that Sweet 16. But that was early. Don DeVoe had like a 6-year run where he didn't miss the NCAA tournament. And then he had like a 5-year run where he never made the NCAA tournament. It was weird.
Yeah. They had a weird couple of coaches back to back in DeVoe and Wade Houston who loved watching his dailies. He was a big soap opera guy during the day. You'd go in and interview. I didn't, but it's before my time. But several journalists said they would go in and interview him about a piece, and he'd be watching as the world turns.
Wow.
All right. So, because he didn't have anything better to do, I guess Allen was going to score. So, what are you supposed to put together as far as a game plan? Go score, Allen.
Well, and you pointed out that Doug Dickey didn't care that he was watching daytime soap operas.
No. Doug Dickey probably pulled up a chair and watched some with it.
So my question then was, I know that before Doug Dickey became athletic director in 1985, I did some digging. Apparently, Johnny Majors really wanted the job, which was common at the time to be head coach and athletic director.
The basketball job? No, I'm kidding.
No, the athletic director job. By the way, early history, like all the legendary Tennessee coaches, like pre-Nalen, they did all coach like basketball. All college coaches back in the day coached all the sports. But Majors, do you think if Majors were athletic director, do you think he would have cared about basketball, or would he have approached it the same way Doug Dickey did?
Same.
Really?
Exact 110% the same. It was already starting to be not a former coach's gig. So I think it would have been exactly the same. Okay. Do you think it would have been much different? I think you would have cared about football and been over backwards. And
I just think that Majors was a multi-sport athlete who was a Tennessee guy. So maybe he was the type of guy that wanted to see the other Tennessee sports do well. Like, whereas Doug Dickey was not a Tennessee guy.
But I go back to the Isaiah Victor incident, and that's why Kevin O'Neal left Tennessee when it looked like they were building something. And it was a boring offense is what they were building, but they were also building some momentum. And Tennessee bent over backwards for a defensive lineman. You remember the old Prop 48 days? There was something called Prop 48 in recruiting where you could show up and you could practice, but you couldn't play. You weren't eligible to play because your grades weren't quite good enough, but they were good enough to get in school theoretically. So Tennessee fought tooth and nail to make sure the defensive lineman, and you would know his name. It escapes me now. It's been so long, 25 years. But
wasn't John Henderson that Prop 48?
That was slightly before him. It was just I thought it was John Henderson might have been a Prop 48.
He couldn't play on the 98 team.
You're right. He was a Prop 48. So, but they fought tooth and nail to get a player eligible, and they didn't fight as hard for Isaiah Victor. And that is what really turned Kevin O'Neal off. And now Kevin O'Neal, let's be fair, has probably some psychological issues himself. But that was the beginning of the end, and that's why he just bolted for Marquette in the middle of the night, Lane Kiffin style. So would Johnny Majors have fought the same battles with basketball and other sports that he would have fought with football in those type of situations? And I'm talking about big-time money. I'm talking about busting it so you have those pregame kickoff classics that were so good for publicity. No, I don't think he would have fought those battles. I think he would have fought them like Doug Dickey, and it was all in football and just, let's see what happens in basketball. But again, Caleb, you and I make business decisions every day. We only have so many hours in the day, and there are certain things that benefit off the Hook Sports by 5%. And if you got to choose between that 5% or the thing that's 95%, that makes an impact in the media world, what are we going to focus on? I don't take it as a shot at those guys. I would have done the same thing, quite frankly.
The only reason I do is you bring up that that was the golden age of college basketball, and it's almost like they missed out on the golden age of college basketball.
That's fair, but you didn't have 39 associate athletic directors running around,
so there was not enough bandwidth.
Right. If you had 39 associate athletic directors, like became the case in the late 90s and early 2000s, throughout the 2000s, then yes, somebody can work on putting that Atlantis tournament together and making sure that Tennessee's in it and they play Duke and Kansas. So I mean, but did you have a dude that was specifically assigned to that? I don't think you did back then.
All right, that makes sense.
I mean, it was just a different world. I mean, you got to remember coaches were making assistant coaches were making $70,000 a year with no multi-year contracts. That's all they wanted. They didn't want to raise. The guys in the 90s just wanted to say, can I get a 2-year contract?
They just wanted a job.
Yeah, so that I can tell my family I'll be here. That's all they want. David Cutcliffe's coaching this guy named Manning, and he was making like 125 grand, I believe.
Wow.
I mean, money's gotten absurd the other direction now, but that was pretty absurd back then.